Perfect, I responded coldly, my voice maintaining its icy composure even as fury blazed through every nerve in my body like molten lava. Then I delivered the knockout punch that erased her smug smile completely from her face. Well, everything gets canceled immediately then. Every single thing you're counting on. The dead silence that followed across the phone line was absolutely deafening. The exact type of pause that occurs when someone finally realizes they've crossed the completely wrong person entirely and there's no going back. I could practically see her face draining of all color through the screen, her confident expression crumbling into shocked disbelief. She believed I was joking around with her. She consistently assumes I'm bluffing about everything important. That's the inevitable consequence of playing the obedient daughter role for far too many years of my life. Everyone forgets how genuinely dangerous you become once you stop desperately seeking their validation and approval like a starving person begging for scraps. My name is Isabella, and I'm 28 years old, currently living alone in a cramped studio apartment. Christmas coordination has been exclusively my responsibility and burden for longer than I care to remember or calculate accurately. Menu planning from scratch, decoration arrangements down to the smallest detail, group chat administration across multiple platforms, crisis management when things inevitably go wrong, all carefully orchestrated behind the scenes so my mother could maintain her flawless reputation with our extended family and friends throughout the community. Every single ornament placement had to be perfect. Every meticulously crafted holiday playlist needed her approval. Every coordinated family outfit selection for photographs required hours of planning and coordination. All of that invisible, thankless labor landed squarely on my shoulders without question, compensation, or even basic acknowledgement of my contributions. This particular year, the same woman whose entire social standing and reputation was constructed upon my relentless behind-the-scenes efforts looked me directly in the eyes through our scheduled video call and boldly declared I was completely unnecessary, utterly unwanted, and permanently excluded from all family celebrations moving forward. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed or apologetic about it. Something fundamental deep inside my chest finally snapped in half like a dry branch. Tears refused to come streaming down my face despite the emotional devastation. Desperate pleading never materialized from my throat even though part of me wanted to beg. Since I had been officially deemed unnecessary by the family matriarch herself, I decided with crystal clarity to demonstrate precisely how necessary my countless contributions truly were to their precious holiday traditions that everyone took for granted. All the guest contact information belonged entirely to me, carefully collected and maintained over years. Every single family tradition had been created and maintained by my efforts alone, from the smallest details to the major events. The real power finally rested completely in my capable hands for once in my entire adult life, and I was going to use it strategically. One perfectly timed message sent to the right people at exactly the right moment could bring her picture-perfect holiday celebration crashing down like an elaborate house of cards during a devastating hurricane. Have you ever seriously considered what actually unfolds when the family's perpetually quiet member finally chooses to completely torch the traditional playbook that everyone assumes will never change? Stay with me until the very end of this story, and I'll reveal exactly how one strategically delivered statement transformed our annual holiday gathering into the most calculated and satisfying revenge I've ever successfully executed against someone who wronged me so deeply. After ending that life-changing phone call, I remained completely motionless in my cramped Boston kitchen for what felt like an eternity. Mobile device still gripped tightly in my trembling palm, screen now completely dark and black, my own furious reflection staring back at me accusingly from the blank surface. Nobody requires your presence this Christmas season at all. Those devastating words echoed relentlessly and mercilessly in my exhausted mind, like a broken record player stuck on the most painful track imaginable. For countless years spanning most of my adult life, I had structured my entire December schedule around that specific house, that elaborate dining setup, that meticulously crafted facade of perfect family harmony and togetherness that was all just performance art. And in one swift, brutal moment, delivered with calculated cruelty, I had been completely eliminated and erased with a single sentence designed to cut as deeply as possible. The most absurd part was exactly how she presented this devastating news, as though she was somehow doing me an enormous favor and blessing. as if cruelly excluding me was some twisted form of merciful liberation from family obligations that I should be grateful for. That's precisely who my mother Catherine is as a person at her core. She systematically destroys you emotionally and psychologically, then pretends she's graciously setting you free from burdens while positioning herself as the victim. Her name is Catherine, though to all outsiders and neighbors throughout our upscale community, she's universally known and celebrated as the woman who creates absolutely magical Christmas experiences for everyone lucky enough to be invited. Completely flawless tree decorations that look like they belong in magazines, completely flawless gourmet cuisine that rivals expensive restaurants, completely flawless family portrait sessions that she posts strategically across social media platforms. They enthusiastically applaud her incredible performance every single year without fail, never questioning the effort behind the magic. They never witness the countless group conversations I coordinate meticulously behind the scenes, the detailed planning spreadsheets I create from scratch every October, the frantic emergency shopping trips I complete when she carelessly overlooks essential items like proper cloth napkins or actual meaningful presents for specific relatives who expect personalized gifts that show thought and care. They don't observe me scrubbing greasy pans and dirty dishes past midnight, while she graciously accepts all the praise and credit, like absolute royalty, accepting beautiful bouquets after a flawless theatrical performance. They don't see me quietly fixing disasters, managing family politics, or smoothing over her mistakes before anyone notices them. They just see the end result and assume she did it all herself through some kind of domestic magic. My brother Nathan simply jokes casually that I naturally excel at these organizational tasks, as if it's some kind of genetic gift rather than learned skill developed through years of being voluntold for everything. Easy for him to confidently declare when he's never lifted a finger to help. His total participation involves simply appearing at the designated time and existing in the space while consuming the food and entertainment I've arranged. Mine encompasses absolutely everything else that actually matters for the event's success. I vividly remembered last year's complete oven malfunction disaster that occurred just 1 hour before all the guests were scheduled to arrive for our annual celebration. She stood there in the kitchen, panicking dramatically like the world was ending, already mentally rehearsing her elaborate victim narrative about completely unreliable kitchen appliances and her tremendous efforts despite impossible circumstances beyond her control. Meanwhile, I quietly arranged emergency professional catering services from 3 different restaurants, strategically adjusted the entire evening's timeline to accommodate the delays, and skillfully convinced everyone that the menu changes were an exciting surprise that had been planned all along as a fun twist on tradition. The guests were actually delighted by what they perceived as Catherine's creative innovation and flexibility. She received countless enthusiastic compliments throughout the night for being so creative and innovative with her menu choices, for thinking outside the box and making the evening special. I received exactly 1 casual, half-hearted thanks. Izzy murmured quietly when no one else was listening, while she confidently posed for numerous photographs in front of the beautifully arranged table that I had personally rescued from complete disaster through quick thinking and expensive emergency solutions paid for with my own credit card. So when she coldly informed me this year with deliberate cruelty that nobody requires your presence, something dark and twisted inside my chest found the entire situation genuinely amusing in the most bitter way possible. If I completely vanished from the picture tomorrow, that house wouldn't simply feel slightly more vacant or lonely during the holidays. It would utterly collapse into complete chaos and disorder within hours of the first planned event. I'm the specific person who consistently reminds Uncle Marcus about his exact departure time for flights from 3 different time zones. I'm the one who personally collects grandmother from her assisted living facility, so she doesn't remain completely isolated and forgotten at home during holidays when family connection matters most. I'm the one who carefully manages the complicated gift exchange roster across 15 different family members with varying budgets and preferences, who sends detailed reminder messages to cousins about their specific responsibilities and deadlines, who gently encourages everyone to actually deliver what they had committed to bringing instead of showing up empty-handed with excuses. Without my direct involvement and constant coordination efforts happening invisibly in the background, Christmas simply ceases to exist entirely as they know it. Not the polished, seamless version they've all grown completely accustomed to experiencing and enjoying without a second thought about the logistics involved, The deeper I contemplated this entire situation over the following hours, the more crystal clear everything became to me. For once in my entire adult life, real control and power resided completely with me instead of being held over my head as leverage. For once, I could personally determine exactly how this particular narrative unfolds and concludes, instead of being a supporting character in someone else's story. She automatically assumes I'll obediently remain in my designated supporting role like always, shed a few private tears behind closed doors, and still dutifully arrive bearing homemade cookies and expensive presents like a loyal servant who knows her place. But this time, I absolutely refuse to play the invisible supporting character in a holiday celebration she claims complete credit for orchestrating while doing none of the actual work. I accessed our large extended family Christmas group conversation and carefully examined the comprehensive list of active participants: uncles, aunts, cousins, family friends, neighbors, even father, all neatly organized under my administrative privileges and control that I'd been granted years ago when Catherine decided managing people was beneath her, but wanted to maintain control over the messaging. Administrator. That particular designation suddenly felt like an incredibly powerful weapon in my hands, loaded and ready to fire. I didn't compose anything immediately or hastily. I deliberately allowed this revolutionary concept to develop and breathe naturally, considering all the angles and potential consequences before committing to any specific course of action. When the person you consistently consider completely disposable suddenly ceases performing all the invisible labor that maintains your life's entire structure and social standing, what exactly occurs as a consequence? Would you still arrive smiling enthusiastically if your own mother coldly declared you weren't needed or wanted at the family celebration? Or would you finally demonstrate exactly how much of her seemingly perfect existence is actually constructed upon your reliable foundation and unpaid labor? The following morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. My phone began buzzing insistently before my alarm even activated, the sound cutting through the early morning silence like an annoying mosquito. I didn't need to check the caller identification to know who was desperately trying to reach me at such an early hour. Nathan, naturally and predictably. He always magically appears whenever Mother requires something diplomatically smoothed over or fixed, like a loyal golden retriever responding to a whistle only he can hear. I deliberately allowed the phone to ring twice, 3 times, then 4 times before finally answering with calculated indifference, wanting him to sweat a little and wonder if I was going to pick up at all. "What do you want exactly?" I said flatly into the phone. No artificial sweetness or forced enthusiasm in my voice. No pretending everything was fine. Just that simple, cold greeting that conveyed exactly how done I was with this entire family's nonsense. "Wow. Good morning to you too, Izzy," he responded with a light, nervous scoff that didn't quite hide his anxiety, then strategically lowered his voice as he slipped into his preferred and well-practiced role. Family peacekeeper and mediator, the role he'd perfected over years of avoiding any real confrontation while making everyone think he was being helpful. "Listen carefully. Mother told me exactly what happened yesterday during your call. She absolutely didn't intend it that specific way. You know how she gets. You understand perfectly how she becomes when she's feeling completely overwhelmed by responsibilities and pressure. She's been under so much stress lately with Father's business problems and everything else going on." There it was immediately, right on schedule, the classic family translation and interpretation system that we'd all learned to speak fluently. "She emotionally wounded you deeply and deliberately. But please don't bleed messily on the expensive furniture where other people might see it and ask uncomfortable questions. Let's all pretend it was a misunderstanding rather than acknowledge the intentional cruelty. She clearly stated that nobody needs me at Christmas," I replied with complete accuracy, not allowing him to reframe or minimize what had actually been said. "She meant exactly what she said, Nathan. She meant it exactly as harshly as it sounded. She just doesn't want unnecessary complications this year," he insisted desperately, his voice taking on that pleading tone he used when he knew he was fighting a losing battle, but felt obligated to try anyway. "She's completely exhausted from everything. You know perfectly well, she's been managing all of this independently for years without any help." I laughed sharply, and the sound that emerged was bitter and hollow. "Managing what exactly independently?" I asked with growing anger. commanding me around constantly while taking credit for my work, ordering me to handle every detail while she gets all the praise. He completely ignored that pointed comment, probably because he knew I was absolutely right, but couldn't admit it without acknowledging his own complicity in the family dynamics. Anyway, even if you're not planning to attend this year, can you at least assist with the usual responsibilities and tasks that everyone's counting on? The group conversations, the reminder messages, the holiday playlist that everyone looks forward to. People are already asking about details and timing. You're absolutely joking right now, I interrupted incredulously, my voice rising with disbelief. So, I'm not needed or wanted personally, but my unpaid labor still is required? My work is essential, but I'm disposable? Complete silence fell on the other end of the line, followed by a long, frustrated exhale that spoke volumes about his growing realization that his usual diplomatic approach wasn't working this time. "Isabella, please don't be overly dramatic about this situation," he finally said, using my full name like he was scolding a child. "This situation isn't really about you personally. It's about keeping the family together during the holidays." I felt my fingers press firmly into the kitchen counter's edge, gripping it so hard my knuckles turned white. "Really?" I asked incredulously. Because she literally made it entirely about me yesterday when she told me I wasn't needed. Nathan kept going like he was reading directly from a script that Mother had personally approved in advance, probably during a phone call immediately after our conversation ended. "Mother's genuinely concerned about you and your attitude lately. She thinks you're deliberately withdrawing from family activities and responsibilities. She's the one who funded your college education, your apartment security deposit, absolutely everything you have. At minimum, you could make Christmas completely effortless for her after everything she's done. She's sacrificed so much over the years." A bitter taste filled my mouth completely, like I'd been chewing on copper pennies. "Funded my college?" I repeated slowly, letting each word hang in the air. "You mean the college I was forced to abandon after exactly one semester because there suddenly wasn't sufficient money for me to continue my education? The college fund that mysteriously disappeared right around the time you needed emergency bailout money? Oh my God. Not this tired argument again," he muttered dismissively, but I could hear the nervousness creeping into his voice. "You know, finances were extremely tight for everyone back then. She did what was absolutely necessary for the entire family's survival. She even used your education fund when Father's business failed catastrophically, and that money helped all of us stay afloat during impossible times." My brain completely froze at his casual admission. "What fund exactly?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a tiny pause as if he realized far too late what he'd accidentally revealed, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "Nothing important. Forget I mentioned it," he said quickly. "Look, just forget about all that ancient history. Can you please just send the reminder message in the group chat? People are actively inquiring about the start time and menu details." But I wasn't listening to anything else he was saying anymore. My heart didn't sink with sadness like it might have in the past. Instead, it hardened with determination and cold fury. There had been a fund. Money specifically designated and saved for my education and future. Money that had my name on it. Money I'd never seen, accessed, or even known existed. Money that had been stolen from me to bail out my brother while I was told there was nothing anyone could do to help me continue my education. "I have to go immediately," I said quietly, and disconnected before he could spin another elaborate story or try to minimize what he'd just accidentally admitted. The silence in my kitchen felt heavy and charged with possibility. Later that same day, I spent hours searching systematically through old emails, files, documents, anything that might confirm my growing suspicions were completely correct. I dug through years of paperwork, bank statements, anything I could find. Finally, buried in an old email folder, I discovered an old message from a bank we used to visit regularly when I was a teenager. It was a notification about an account in my name that had been opened when I was just 12 years old. Attached to the email was a scanned document, a note written in my grandmother's careful handwriting, college savings for Isabella only, not to be touched for any other purpose. The account details showed regular deposits over years, growing steadily with interest and careful management. But then I found what I was looking for, the smoking gun that confirmed my worst suspicions. The final transaction showed the entire balance completely emptied 5 years ago in a single withdrawal. Same exact year, Nathan had suddenly gotten rescued from a financial mess with his credit cards and gambling debts. The withdrawal authorization had 2 names on it, mine and Catherine's. My signature looked questionable and rushed, sloppier than I remembered ever signing anything important. As I stared at the document, memories started flooding back. I remembered Catherine asking me to sign various papers around that time, telling me they were just routine banking updates or tax documents. I remembered being stressed about school and my uncertain future, trusting her completely when she said the papers were nothing important. I had been so naive, so trusting. My hands trembled violently as the full scope of the betrayal became clear, but not from sadness anymore, from absolute clarity and righteous anger. She hadn't just excluded me from Christmas celebrations recently. She'd been systematically stealing pieces from my future for years, robbing me of opportunities while positioning herself as the generous mother who sacrificed for her children. And now she wanted me quiet and obedient for one more performance, one more holiday where she got all the credit while I did all the work. I opened the family Christmas chat again with newfound purpose. This time I didn't hesitate for a single second. I created a completely new group message titled Holiday Update 2024. I methodically added absolutely everyone from the original list, except Mother and Nathan. Then I carefully composed my message, weighing each word for maximum impact. Hey everyone, just a quick update about this year's Christmas celebration. Mother told me yesterday that she's feeling really overwhelmed this year and doesn't want a large gathering. She specifically asked me to scale things down significantly, so I'll be hosting anyone who still wants to celebrate at my place in Boston instead. I totally understand if you already have other plans or commitments, but if you'd like a warm meal, meaningful gifts, and some honest conversation without walking on eggshells, my door is completely open to you. I stared at the message for several long moments, reading it over multiple times to make sure the tone was exactly right. Helpful and accommodating, but with just enough subtle truth to plant seeds of doubt about Catherine's version of events. Then I hit send decisively, watching the message disappear into cyberspace where it would soon cause chaos. The replies started flowing in immediately, faster than I had anticipated. My phone buzzed constantly as family members responded with enthusiasm and relief. Honestly, a smaller gathering sounds absolutely perfect this year. We were only coming because of you anyway, Izzy. Can I bring dessert? Aunt Sarah's message was followed quickly by Uncle David's. I've been dreading another one of Catherine's tense dinners. Your place sounds much more relaxing. I watched with growing satisfaction as my mother's carefully constructed empire began to wobble precariously, one polite message at a time. Each response felt like a small victory, validation that I wasn't the only one who had noticed the toxic dynamics that Catherine pretended didn't exist. Tell me honestly, if you discovered your mother had secretly drained your college fund to rescue your golden child brother while lying to your face about it for years, would you still play nice at Christmas? Or would you start rewriting the guest list too? By day's end, my small apartment was rapidly transforming into Plan B, the authentic Christmas celebration that people actually wanted to attend. My phone kept buzzing constantly with messages from family members asking what they could contribute, what time they should arrive, whether children were welcome to attend, and expressing genuine excitement about a more relaxed celebration. Every single notification on my phone felt like another nail in the coffin of my mother's perfect public image, and I was savoring each one. I didn't tell them about the fun discovery immediately. Not yet. I wanted that devastating truth to land at precisely the right moment, in exactly the right way for maximum impact. Revenge isn't just about raw anger or emotional outbursts. It's about perfect timing and strategic planning, about choosing your battles and your weapons carefully. Between answering messages and planning my own celebration, I set up my phone on the kitchen counter and hit record. If my mother wanted me completely invisible and erased from the family narrative, I was going to do the exact opposite. I was going to make sure my story was heard loud and clear. My mother told me yesterday that nobody needed me to come home for Christmas this year. I started, staring directly into the camera lens with steady confidence. So, I decided to see what would happen if I stopped doing all the invisible work I've been doing for her my entire adult life. Let me tell you what I discovered about the woman who raised me. I didn't mention her name specifically, or any other family members' names. I just told my story systematically, laying out the years of emotional manipulation, the unpaid labor disguised as family tradition, the way I'd been treated like hired staff instead of a beloved daughter. I talked about the decorations I arranged, the planning I coordinated, the disasters I fixed while someone else took all the credit. I didn't cry or break down emotionally. I didn't beg the audience to feel sorry for me or validate my feelings. I just presented facts one by one, like courtroom evidence building toward an inevitable conclusion. My voice remained steady and clear throughout the entire recording. At the end, I smiled, a small, cold smile I barely recognized as my own, but felt completely authentic. If you've ever been the forgotten one in your own family, the one who does all the work while someone else gets all the praise, I said directly to the camera, this Christmas is for us. This is for everyone who's tired of being invisible. I saved the video carefully, scheduled it to go live on the evening of December 24th for maximum impact, and set my phone down with satisfaction. Let the internet watch what happens when you push the quiet one too far and they finally decide to fight back publicly. Then I got to work systematically dismantling every arrangement Catherine was counting on. I called the catering company my mother uses every single year, speaking to them under my account since I was the one who actually placed all the orders and handled all the logistics. Catherine never wanted anything traceable to her personal credit card, preferring to maintain plausible deniability about expenses. Hi, this is Isabella, calling about the holiday catering order for the 24th, I said sweetly to the customer service representative. I need to cancel that entire order completely, everything we discussed. Yes, the appetizers, main courses, desserts, everything. The representative sounded confused and concerned, asking if everything was all right and if we wanted to reschedule instead of canceling completely. Plans have changed dramatically, I explained cheerfully. We've decided to go in a completely different direction this year. Thank you so much for your flexibility and understanding. The cancellation was processed within minutes, leaving Catherine without the gourmet meal she was counting on to impress her remaining guests. Next, I opened the email thread with the linen rental company, the upscale business that delivered pristine tablecloths and chair covers so everything would look elegant and magazine-worthy. I sent a simple but effective message. Plans have changed for our holiday event. Please cancel our December 24th rental order immediately. Thank you for your service this year. Finally, I called grandmother at her assisted living facility. She picked up on the second ring, her voice immediately brightening when she heard mine. Isabella, are you excited for Christmas at your mother's beautiful house? She asked, already breathless with anticipation for what she expected to be another magical celebration. My throat tightened slightly, but I didn't let the emotion show in my voice. Actually, grandmother, Mother told me yesterday that she's feeling really overwhelmed this year with everything going on, I said carefully, choosing my words for maximum believability. She's decided to scale things way back significantly this year, making it much smaller and more intimate. But I didn't want you to be stuck alone during the holidays when family connection matters most. So, how would you feel about spending Christmas at my place instead? I'll come get you personally, and we can create new memories together. There was a pause, then a soft, genuinely excited laugh that warmed my heart. Oh, sweetheart. I would absolutely love that more than anything, she said with obvious delight. It's been far too long since I've seen your apartment and spent real time with you. Your mother's been so busy with her social obligations, she hardly lets me visit anymore or spend individual time with family members. Yeah, I said quietly, staring at the wall as the full scope of Catherine's control became even clearer. She's always busy with something. After I hung up, I checked the family group chats again to see how the chaos was developing. My mother had created a smaller side group labeled Immediate Family Only and was furiously typing paragraph after paragraph. I watched the notifications accumulate rapidly as her panic became obvious even through text messages. I don't understand what's wrong with Isabella lately, she had written in multiple messages. She's trying to deliberately ruin Christmas for everyone. Nathan, you need to talk some serious sense into her immediately before this gets completely out of hand. This is family sabotage and I won't tolerate it. She truly believed with complete conviction that I was the problem, that I was the one being unreasonable and destructive. That was perfectly fine with me. She could scream into her little echo chamber all she wanted. The rest of the family was already enthusiastically making alternative plans that didn't include her toxic energy. Around midnight, my phone lit up again with another incoming call. Nathan again, this time requesting a video call so he could see my face and try to gauge my emotional state. I answered, curious to see how desperate he was becoming. His face filled my screen immediately, looking annoyed, tired, and increasingly worried about the situation spiraling beyond his control. "What the hell are you doing exactly?" he demanded without any pleasantries, his usual diplomatic facade cracking under pressure. "People keep asking if Christmas is officially canceled at Mother's house. Did you actually tell them that? Are you trying to destroy our family?" I told them exactly what Mother wanted. I replied with perfect calm, my voice steady and reasonable, that she wanted something smaller and more manageable this year, which is completely true based on what she told me. She doesn't want me there, remember? She made that crystal clear. "You're deliberately twisting her words and you know it," he snapped, his frustration becoming more obvious. "She just wanted less chaos and stress, not complete cancellation. She didn't mean she wanted you excluded permanently." "Then she got exactly what she asked for," I said with a slight shrug. "Fewer people, less chaos, less stress, and definitely less me. Problem solved for everyone involved." His jaw clenched tightly as he struggled to find a new angle of attack. "You're taking this way too far, Isabella. This is supposed to be about family unity and tradition. You can't just sabotage Christmas because your feelings got hurt. We're adults. We should be able to work through disagreements without nuclear options." "That's interesting," I said thoughtfully, because she had absolutely no problem sabotaging my entire future the day she signed away my college fund to bail you out financially. Funny how family unity only matters when it's convenient for certain people. This time, Nathan didn't have a quick comeback ready. He just stared at me through the screen, his expression shifting from anger to concern, to something resembling guilt. "You don't understand everything that happened back then," he muttered weakly, looking away from the camera. "The family was in crisis. Difficult decisions had to be made quickly. Maybe I don't understand everything," I agreed calmly. "But she's about to understand exactly how it feels to have your plans destroyed without your consent." I ended the call before he could respond or try another guilt trip. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining yourself endlessly to people who never actually listen anyway. If your entire family structure was built on lies you didn't consent to participate in, how far would you be willing to go to finally make everyone see the truth clearly? 2 days before Christmas, the carefully maintained family mask finally slipped completely. My phone rang again in the late afternoon, and this time the caller ID showed my mother's name. Not texting from a safe distance, not hiding behind Nathan's diplomatic intervention. A full, old-fashioned confrontational phone call where she'd have to speak to me directly. I let the phone ring long enough to make a point about my newfound boundaries, then answered with deliberate casualness. "Yes?" I said simply. No hi, Mother. No forced cheer or fake enthusiasm. No pretending everything was normal. Just that one word that conveyed exactly how done I was with her manipulation tactics. "What exactly do you think you're doing to this family?" she hissed into the phone without any greeting or pleasantries. No hello from her either, jumping straight into attack mode as usual. "I just got off an extremely embarrassing phone call with your aunt questioning everything. She says you told her I canceled Christmas. How dare you spread lies about me?" I told her exactly what you told me, I corrected firmly, refusing to let her rewrite recent history. "That you didn't want a big crowd this year. Which is exactly what you communicated to me when you said nobody needs me to come home. I was just being helpful by passing along your preferences. Don't you dare twist my words like that," she snapped, her voice sharpening to the tone she used when she was losing control of a situation. "You know perfectly well I was talking about your negative attitude lately, not your physical presence at family events. You've been difficult and ungrateful." I actually laughed out loud at her attempt to gaslight me. "So my attitude isn't needed or wanted. but my unpaid labor organizing everything still is? That's fascinating logic, Mother. Oh, for God's sake, Isabella, she said, her voice taking on that particular shrill quality that meant she was getting truly angry. This ridiculous martyr complex is getting old and embarrassing. You've always been overly sensitive about everything. You act like you're enslaved when all you do is send a few text messages and bake some cookies occasionally. It's not exactly hard labor. Heat flooded my chest at her casual dismissal of years of work. A few messages? I repeated, my voice getting sharper. You signed me up for years of unpaid event planning and called it family tradition. I handle absolutely everything that matters, Mother, and you know it perfectly well. There was a shaky breath on the other end of the line. Then she decided to go for the jugular with her favorite manipulation tactic. You want to talk about real work and sacrifice? She said, her voice dripping with fake martyrdom. I worked my fingers to the bone for you ungrateful children. I used my personal savings so you could have a future and opportunities. I sacrificed absolutely everything for this family, and this is how you repay me? By turning everyone against me and destroying our traditions? I almost let her have that familiar narrative, the same story she'd been telling for years to justify every selfish decision. Almost. But then I remembered the bank statement I'd found, the drained account, my forged signature on withdrawal papers. The evidence was irrefutable. Your savings? I asked quietly, letting the question hang in the air like a loaded weapon. Or mine? The silence that followed was real and telling, not the calculated dramatic pause she usually employed for effect. What exactly are you talking about? She said, but her voice had dropped noticeably, losing its sharp edge and confident authority. I opened the photo I'd taken of the old bank statement, my thumb hovering over the send button in the group chat. For a moment I considered sending it to the immediate family-only chat, but then I changed my mind and selected the larger group, Holiday Update 2024, where everyone could see it clearly. I'm talking about the college fund that grandmother specifically set up in my name when I was 12, I said with deadly calm. The one you completely drained 5 years ago without my knowledge or consent. The one you used to bail Nathan out of his gambling debts while telling me there wasn't enough money for me to continue my education. That fund, Mother. That money was designated for the entire family's emergency needs. She snapped desperately, suddenly regaining some of her defensive bite, as she realized I had concrete evidence. Your father's business was failing catastrophically. Nathan was drowning in debt that could have destroyed his credit permanently. We did what we absolutely had to do to save everyone. Stop acting like the world revolves around you and your selfish desires. Right? I murmured with bitter understanding. You did what you had to do for everyone except me. You stole my future to protect your golden child, then made me feel guilty for wanting anything better for myself. My thumb hovered over the send button again as I crafted the perfect message to accompany the evidence. This time I attached the screenshot and wrote a carefully composed message to the whole group. Since Mother told me that nobody needs me to come this Christmas, I decided to host whoever still wants to celebrate. Also, for those family members who ever wondered why I never finished college despite being an excellent student, here's the real answer. I didn't hit send immediately, not yet. My mother was still talking frantically, ranting about family loyalty and respect, about how I was ungrateful and systematically brainwashing everyone against her. She was spiraling into her victim narrative while simultaneously trying to justify stealing from me. I barely heard the specific words anymore. I was staring at that unsent message, at the tiny blue arrow that would change absolutely everything once I pressed it. Once I sent this evidence, there would be no way back to pretending everything was fine. No more family gatherings where we all acted like nothing was wrong. No more it's just how she is excuses. No more she means well despite everything justifications. Just truth, bare and ugly and completely real, exposed for everyone to see and judge. You think you're so powerful, she spat venomously when she realized I wasn't responding to her justifications. You think you can ruin my Christmas and destroy everything I've built? Let me be extremely clear, Isabella. Nobody needs you to come home. Stay in your pathetic little apartment with your pity party and victim mentality. We'll all be just fine without your negative energy and constant complaining. I felt my face go completely cold as her mask slipped entirely. There it was, The real Catherine without any pretense or diplomatic language. This time there were no excuses, no claims of misunderstanding, no wrong tone deflections. Just the venomous sentence delivered with full intention to wound. All the cruelty exposed. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at her contact name on the screen, hearing her voice still going on and on with abuse and justifications. Then I brought the device back to my ear and said with perfect calm, "Absolutely perfect." I could almost hear her confusion and growing alarm before I added the final blow. "Well, consider everything officially canceled then, just like you wanted." I ended the call immediately, and without giving myself even one more second to hesitate or reconsider, I hit send on the message with the bank statement attached. Tell me honestly, if you had documented proof in your hand that your own mother had systematically stolen your future to protect her favorite child while lying to your face about it for years, would you keep the peace to maintain family harmony, or would you press that button and expose the truth regardless of consequences? The fallout started almost immediately after I hit send that devastating message. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree on steroids, buzzing and pinging constantly with incoming notifications. Only this time, the digital lights were accusations, shock, complete disbelief, and growing outrage from every corner of my extended family. "Is this really real?" A cousin wrote frantically in all capital letters. "What fund are you talking about?" "I've never heard of this," another family member asked in obvious confusion and disbelief. Grandmother sent a confused voice note, her elderly voice shaking with emotion, as she asked if this was some kind of terrible mistake or misunderstanding. Within minutes, the family group chat had exploded into complete chaos and information sharing. Messages were flying in faster than I could possibly read them all. Some people were demanding detailed explanations and timelines. Others were sharing their own long-held suspicions they'd harbored for years, and a few were desperately trying to play peacemaker and calm everyone down. The screenshot I'd shared was being dissected line by family members with banking and financial experience. People were asking pointed questions about dates, amounts, signatures, legal implications. The evidence was completely undeniable, and everyone could see it clearly displayed in official bank documentation. I replied once clearly and definitively, "This is absolutely real and fully documented. I just discovered this recently through my own investigation. I'm not asking anyone to take sides in this family conflict. I'm simply not hiding the truth anymore, or protecting people who hurt me." After that single response, I deliberately let the chat run completely wild and unchecked, watching the family dynamics explode in real time. People started sharing their own disturbing stories about Catherine's behavior over the years that they'd never felt comfortable discussing openly before. Times my mother had borrowed money and never repaid it, systematically shifted blame onto innocent parties for her mistakes, twisted truth to suit her narrative and protect her image. It was like ripping up an expensive carpet and discovering disgusting black mold spreading underneath that had been growing and festering for decades. Aunt Margaret shared how Catherine had borrowed $3,000 2 years ago for emergency car repairs, providing detailed documentation and timeline, but then posted photos on social media of an expensive spa weekend getaway that same month. When questioned about the discrepancy, Catherine had claimed the spa trip was a gift from father, but financial records showed otherwise. Cousin David mentioned how Catherine always seemed to have elaborate explanations for why other people's money problems were actually their own fault due to poor planning, while her own family's financial struggles were consistently blamed on external circumstances beyond anyone's control, like market conditions or father's business challenges. Uncle Robert revealed that he'd always wondered why I'd dropped out of college so suddenly when I'd been such an excellent student with a bright future ahead of me. He'd specifically asked Catherine about it at the time, offering to help with tuition costs, and she'd given him a vague story about me being overwhelmed by academic pressure and choosing to take a break. He said he'd repeatedly offered to help with educational expenses, but Catherine had told him I was too proud to accept charity from family members. The irony wasn't lost on anyone reading that particular message thread. Everyone had smelled something off about our family dynamics for years, sensing that things weren't quite right beneath the perfect surface. Now they finally saw the ugly truth clearly for what it really was, documented and undeniable. Meanwhile, in the immediate family-only chat, my mother was completely unraveling in real time. Her messages became increasingly frantic and desperate as the night wore on, and more family members began openly questioning her actions and motivations. "How dare you air our private family matters like dirty laundry?" she wrote with obvious panic and fury. "This is a complete betrayal of everything I've done for you over the years." Nathan tried valiantly to play mediator again, just as he'd done countless times before throughout our family conflicts. "Mother, please calm down and think clearly. We can discuss this privately later when emotions aren't running so high," he typed desperately, probably hoping to contain the damage and limit the scope of the family discussion. But even in text messages, I could feel his growing panic and realization that the situation was completely beyond his usual diplomatic control. He hadn't known I'd found concrete, irrefutable proof of what had happened with my college fund. He hadn't expected me to aim this high, or hit this strategically. He was completely accustomed to me backing down, apologizing quickly, and smoothing things over to maintain peace. This time was fundamentally different, and he could sense it. Catherine's messages became increasingly erratic, as more family members began questioning things they'd never thought to examine before. She started sending long, rambling paragraphs justifying her past actions, explaining how desperate the family's financial situation had been, how she'd had no choice but to make difficult decisions quickly. But with each defensive explanation, she inadvertently revealed more details that contradicted previous stories she'd told over the years to different people. The morning of December 24th arrived gray and cold, but I felt lighter and more energetic than I had in years. My scheduled video had gone live at exactly midnight, and my notifications were exploding as strangers on the internet discovered my story and began sharing it widely. Comments were pouring in by the hundreds from people all over the world. Likes were accumulating rapidly, and the video was being shared across multiple social media platforms at an incredible rate. People were telling me their own remarkably similar stories in the comments, sharing their own toxic holiday traditions, their own mothers who treated them like convenient props in elaborate family dramas designed to make someone else look good. The response was overwhelming and validating in ways I hadn't expected or prepared for emotionally. I read comment after comment from people who immediately recognized themselves in my story. Women who'd been designated as the family organizers and coordinators. The invisible laborers who made everything work behind the scenes. Men who'd watched their sisters get consistently overlooked, while their mothers played obvious favorites. Adult children who'd discovered financial betrayals years after the fact when it was too late to do anything about it legally. The response was international and immediate. People shared stories about holiday traditions that were actually elaborate performances, about family members who took credit for others' work, about parents who stole from their children's futures to fund their own priorities or rescue their favorite children from consequences. But more importantly, I read enough comments to realize something absolutely crucial. I wasn't alone in this experience of family toxicity and manipulation, and my family's specific dysfunction wasn't unique or special in any way. It was actually quite common, just usually hidden behind closed doors and family loyalty. It was just finally being dragged into the harsh light of day where everyone could see it clearly and recognize the patterns. By late afternoon on Christmas Eve, my small apartment was filled with the most wonderful aromas. Cinnamon and roasted garlic filled every corner, mixing with the pine scent from the small tree I'd bought and decorated myself. The smell of cookies baking in the oven added another layer of warmth and comfort to the space. I moved constantly between the stove and the front door, letting in guests as they arrived throughout the afternoon and evening. Each arrival felt like a small personal victory, a person choosing truth and authenticity over comfortable lies and toxic traditions. The energy in my apartment was completely different from Catherine's tense, performative gatherings. Cousins arrived carrying homemade casseroles and covered dishes, their faces bright with genuine excitement about a different kind of celebration. Uncle Robert showed up with several bottles of excellent wine and a genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Even neighbors who'd seen my viral video online knocked on my door just to drop off desserts and offer hugs of support and solidarity. Some were people I'd never even spoken to before, but they'd been moved by my story and wanted to show support for someone standing up to family toxicity. The most emotional arrival was grandmother, clinging to my arm with tears in her eyes, but smiling more broadly than I'd seen in years. I'd driven across town to collect her from her assisted living facility, and during the car ride, she'd shared stories I'd never heard before about my mother's behavior and manipulation over the years. Things she'd noticed, but never felt comfortable addressing directly or discussing openly with anyone. The relief in her voice when she talked about finally understanding what had really happened to my college fund was absolutely palpable. She'd been the one who set up that account, making regular deposits and specifically designating it for my education only. Learning that Catherine had stolen it explained so many things that had never made sense to her about my sudden departure from college. "You did all this yourself," she whispered, as she looked around my decorated apartment with obvious amazement and pride. "All these years and you never got proper credit for your contributions to our family celebrations. I'm so sorry I didn't see the manipulation clearly sooner, or speak up more forcefully when I had suspicions." I swallowed the growing lump in my throat and squeezed her fragile hand gently. "You see it now clearly, and that's enough for me," I said honestly. Around 7 in the evening, just as the party was reaching its peak energy level with laughter and genuine conversation, my father called. I stared at his contact name on my phone screen for several long moments, debating whether to answer. But something deep inside me needed to hear his voice, needed to understand where he stood in all of this chaos I'd created and truth I'd exposed. "Isabella," he said when I finally picked up, his voice sounding significantly older and more tired than I remembered from our last conversation months ago. I can hear people in the background having a good time. "What's going on over there?" "You saw the screenshot I shared in the family group," I replied calmly, keeping my voice steady despite the complex emotions swirling inside me. "You tell me what you think is going on, Father." He sighed heavily, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years of family secrets, compromises, and willful ignorance. "Things were extremely complicated financially back then," he said slowly. "I was drowning in business debt that threatened everything we'd built. Your mother made difficult choices that seemed absolutely necessary at the time for our survival. With my money specifically," I said, my voice growing sharper and more direct. "With my future that was planned and saved for by someone who loved me, without my knowledge, consent, or even basic honesty about what you were doing." There was a long pause on his end, and I could hear the television playing quietly in the background of their house. The house where Catherine was probably sitting alone at a dining room table set for 20 people, just as he was about to tell me. "Yes, Isabella," he finally said, and the quiet admission hit me like a physical blow to the chest. "You're absolutely right about all of that." I waited patiently for an apology, for some expression of genuine regret or acknowledgement of how fundamentally wrong the deception had been. The apology never came, just like I'd expected. Instead, he said something that revealed just how much he still didn't understand the situation or accept responsibility. "Your mother is completely devastated right now about tonight. Half the family isn't coming to dinner. Your brother left the house in anger about an hour ago after a terrible argument. Is this really what you wanted to accomplish with all this?" I looked around my crowded apartment with fresh eyes, seeing it clearly. People were laughing loudly at someone's story. Glasses were clinking together in genuine toasts. Children were playing with colorful wrapping paper scattered across the floor. The atmosphere felt messy and loud and completely authentic, in ways Catherine's perfectly orchestrated dinners never had. This was what real family felt like. I wanted the truth to finally come out into the open, I said firmly. Whatever natural consequences come with that truth being exposed are exactly that. Consequences for actions people chose to take. "You've completely humiliated her in front of the entire extended family," he said, and I could hear the accusation and blame in his voice. "She's sitting alone at a dining room table set for 20 people, and there are exactly 4 people in that house tonight." For a brief second, a tiny flicker of guilt tried to claw its way up into my chest. Then I remembered myself at 18 years old, crying quietly in my bedroom because I couldn't afford to go back to school and continue my education, being told repeatedly by both parents, "There's absolutely nothing we can do to help you financially," while my brother mysteriously got bailed out of his 3rd major financial disaster that same year, with money that had my name on it. I remembered Catherine saying I was too sensitive and emotional whenever she deliberately hurt my feelings. I remembered her voice clearly saying just 2 days ago, Nobody needs you to come this Christmas. The guilt evaporated completely, replaced by justified anger. Then she finally knows exactly how it feels to be excluded and unwanted, I replied with conviction. Every single year I sat at that table and felt like a placeholder, like living furniture. She chose this path when she decided to steal from my future and then exclude me from family events. I just stopped covering it up and pretending everything was fine. He didn't respond immediately to that statement. The silence on the other end told me he knew I was absolutely right, even if he'd never admit it out loud or take my side publicly against his wife. "Merry Christmas, Father," I said with finality, and hung up before he could try to guilt me further or attempt to convince me to apologize for exposing uncomfortable truths. About 2 hours later, just as people were settling in for an impromptu game night with cards and board games, there was a knock at my door. Loud, frantic, desperate sounding. For just a second, my stomach dropped with anxiety. But when I opened the door cautiously, it wasn't my mother standing there looking for a confrontation. It was Nathan, looking completely disheveled and emotionally drained. He stood there in the hallway with no winter coat, despite the freezing December temperature. His cheeks flushed bright red from the cold, holding a half-wrapped gift awkwardly in his trembling hands. Behind him, the apartment building hallway was empty and eerily quiet. "Can I please come in?" he asked quietly, and his voice didn't carry any of its usual confidence or authoritative tone. It sounded small and uncertain, almost defeated. "That depends entirely on your intentions," I said, studying his face carefully for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. "Are you here to drag me back to Mother's table like a good little soldier? Or are you here to actually listen for once in your life?" He exhaled slowly and deeply, his shoulders slumping with obvious defeat and emotional exhaustion. "I left the house," he admitted quietly, his voice barely audible. "She spent the entire dinner screaming about you, about how you'd ruined everything she'd worked for over the years. She didn't apologize once, not to anyone about anything. I kept waiting for her to take some responsibility or show some remorse. She just kept saying over and over how embarrassed and humiliated she felt. Embarrassed, I repeated, noting the crucial distinction that revealed everything. Not sorry for what she'd done to me. Not regretful about lying to my face for years. Not guilty about stealing my future. Just embarrassed that she'd been caught and exposed publicly. He nodded miserably, finally understanding the important difference between those two very different emotional responses. There's a huge difference between feeling embarrassed about getting caught and feeling genuinely sorry for hurting someone, I said. He looked directly at me then. Really looked. Like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years, instead of seeing me through Catherine's lens and manipulation. "I had absolutely no idea about the college account," he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the sounds of celebration behind me. I knew Mother had somehow found money when I was in serious financial trouble, but I honestly don't know what I thought exactly. That she had secret savings somewhere we didn't know about. That Father had helped somehow. I genuinely didn't realize she had taken it directly from your future. You never asked where your repeated financial rescue money came from, I replied matter-of-factly, refusing to let him off the hook entirely. You never wanted to know the source of your convenient safety net that appeared whenever you needed it. He physically flinched at my words as if I'd slapped him. "You're absolutely right," he said with genuine remorse. "I didn't want to know. That willful ignorance is completely on me, and I have to live with that now." The living room behind me erupted in laughter at some joke someone had told. The contrast between my warm, genuine apartment full of people who actually wanted to be there and the cold, lonely picture he'd just painted of Catherine's house was almost cinematically perfect. "So why are you here now?" I asked directly, wanting to understand his motivations. Because he said, his voice rough with genuine emotion, "I'm tired of spending holidays pretending everything is normal when it's absolutely not. I'm tired of acting like our family dynamics are healthy when they're clearly toxic." I stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. "Then come inside," I told him clearly. "But understand this completely before you cross this threshold. I'm not the family punching bag or unpaid event coordinator anymore. If you're here, you need to be here as my brother who respects me, not as Mother's messenger or spy." He nodded earnestly and walked past me, his eyes widening with genuine surprise at the sight of everyone gathered in my small space, laughing and enjoying themselves authentically. For the first time in his life, he was seeing what I could build without Catherine's toxic involvement, what I could be without constantly begging for approval or validation from someone who withheld it as a control mechanism. Watching the person who hurt you deeply finally sit completely alone in the mess they created with their own choices feels incredibly satisfying in the moment. But is it as emotionally fulfilling as you initially imagined it would be? Or does it leave a different kind of quiet emptiness behind that you weren't expecting to feel? Christmas night stretched on endlessly in a beautiful blur of organized chaos and genuine warmth that I'd never experienced during Catherine's rigid, controlled celebrations. We played ridiculous party games that had everyone doubled over with laughter until our stomachs hurt. Someone accidentally burned one of the side dishes badly, so we collectively decided to order pizza as a joke, which somehow made the evening even more fun and memorable than any perfect meal could have been. At some point during the evening, Cousin David started an impromptu sing-along that went horribly off-key because none of us could actually sing well, but nobody cared because we were all laughing too hard to stay on pitch anyway. The imperfection made it perfect in a way that Catherine's controlled performances never could be. Grandmother laughed so hard at one point that she had to sit down and catch her breath, wiping tears from her eyes while clutching her sides. Watching her genuine joy and freedom was worth everything I'd gone through to get to this moment of truth and authenticity. My apartment wasn't large or spacious like Catherine's house. It wasn't fancy or elegantly decorated with expensive, coordinated pieces, and absolutely nothing matched in any professional way. But for the first time in my entire adult life, I felt like I was hosting something that was completely and authentically mine. Not a carefully orchestrated show designed to make someone else look good, but a real home filled with people who genuinely wanted to be there with me. Nathan stayed mostly in the corner during the first hour, looking awkward and uncomfortable, as if he'd stepped into a completely different universe where family gatherings were actually enjoyable rather than stressful performances with hidden agendas. Eventually, our cousin Maria dragged him into a competitive card game, and I watched his shoulders gradually relax little by little as the evening progressed, and he realized no one was going to attack him or demand explanations. He caught my eye once across the crowded room and silently mouthed, "Thank you for letting me stay." I simply nodded in acknowledgement. He had an extremely long way to go to repair our relationship and earn back trust, but at least he was finally walking in the right direction instead of blindly following Catherine's manipulative lead. Around midnight, after most of the guests had reluctantly gone home to their own lives, and my apartment was littered with empty plates and colorful torn wrapping paper, there was another knock at my door. This particular knock was different from Nathan's earlier desperate pounding. It was measured, controlled, but somehow more ominous and threatening. This time, I knew exactly who it was before I even stood up from the couch where I'd been relaxing. My entire body went completely still with anticipation. Nathan straightened up on the couch where he'd been helping me clean up, his face growing serious as he recognized the sound. "You don't have to open it if you don't want to," he murmured supportively. "I know," I replied calmly, "but I'm going to anyway." I had things that needed to be said. I opened the door just enough to see her standing there alone. Catherine, my mother, looking like a shadow of her usual commanding self. She stood alone in the hallway wearing her best holiday dress, but her usually perfect makeup was smudged around her eyes, her meticulously styled hair was slightly out of place, and she was clutching her phone like it was a lifeline to sanity and control. Behind her, the corridor was empty and eerily quiet. No backup reinforcements, no audience to perform for, just the two of us finally alone to settle things. "Isabella," she said, her voice unusually low and lacking its typical authority and bite. She wasn't angry or yelling as I'd expected based on her text messages. Something much worse was happening. Her voice sounded small and defeated, almost broken. "Can we talk privately about everything?" I stepped into the hallway and pulled my apartment door mostly closed behind me, leaving just a small crack open so I could still hear the faint sounds of my own world. My chosen family cleaning up and talking quietly inside. "About what exactly?" I asked, crossing my arms and maintaining my physical distance. About how I supposedly ruined your Christmas celebration. She physically winced at my words as if they caused actual pain. You didn't ruin my Christmas, she said carefully, choosing her words. You completely ruined mine and destroyed everything I worked for. No, I corrected her firmly, refusing to let her reframe the situation. I stopped pretending everything was fine for your benefit and convenience. You ruined your own Christmas all by yourself through your choices and actions over many years. Her eyes flashed with a brief spark of her old anger and defensiveness. For just a moment, I thought she might snap back at me, unleashing the full devastating force of her favorite weapons, guilt manipulation, and emotional blackmail designed to make me feel responsible for her feelings. Instead, she took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, seeming to deflate slightly under the weight of everything that had happened. Everyone in our family is talking about that screenshot you shared, she said quietly, her voice lacking its usual confidence. About the video you posted online for complete strangers to see our private business. I can't show my face anywhere in our community without people looking at me like I'm some kind of monster or criminal. Maybe you should stop acting like one then, I replied without hesitation or sympathy. Her jaw tightened visibly at my response. You have absolutely no idea what it took to hold this entire family together during those difficult financial years, she whispered intensely, her voice full of justification and self-pity. Your father was completely useless with money management and business decisions. Nathan was recklessly destroying his credit rating with stupid choices and gambling. I did what I had to do to save everyone from financial ruin. You did what you had to do. I repeated her words back to her with cold precision. Fine. Own that decision completely and stop making excuses. But don't you dare stand there and pretend you did any of it for my benefit or with my best interests in mind. You systematically stole from my future while lying to my face about it for years. You made me feel guilty and selfish for wanting anything better for myself. And then you had the audacity to call me unnecessary when I finally stopped killing myself to make you look good to other people. Her eyes began to glisten with unshed tears. But I didn't move toward her or offer comfort as I'd been trained to do my entire life. I'd been conditioned since childhood to rush in and comfort her whenever she cried, even immediately after she'd hurt me deliberately. Not this time. This time I was going to let her sit with the full consequences of her actions without rescuing her from discomfort. I shouldn't have said that specific thing to you, she admitted, her voice cracking slightly with emotion that might have been genuine. I was angry and hurt by your attitude. You were being difficult and challenging my authority in ways that felt disrespectful. Being difficult, I echoed her words back to her. You called me unnecessary completely on purpose to hurt and punish me. You wanted me to feel exactly as bad as possible. I was hurt too, she shot back defensively, falling back into her victim narrative. You were actively turning everyone against me with your complaints, planning your own Christmas celebration specifically to spite me and make me look bad. I planned my own Christmas because you explicitly and clearly uninvited me from yours, I said calmly, refusing to let her rewrite recent history to suit her preferred narrative. I didn't turn anyone against you. I simply stopped hiding and covering up what you did to me over the years. We stood there staring at each other intensely for several long moments. Years and years of unspoken resentments and hidden truths hanging between us like thick, choking smoke that made it hard to breathe. Finally, she whispered desperately, playing her final card. I'm completely alone now, Isabella. Your father is emotionally useless and won't stand up to anyone. Your brother walked out on me tonight after saying terrible things. Half the extended family isn't speaking to me anymore. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted to accomplish? The old version of me would have completely broken down right there. I would have rushed forward, wrapped my arms around her, and apologized profusely for making her feel bad, taking responsibility for her emotions and everyone else's reactions to her behavior. But tonight, I could see the manipulation clearly for exactly what it was. Not genuine vulnerability or remorse, but calculated emotional blackmail designed to make me feel guilty and responsible for consequences she'd brought on herself. No, I said honestly and clearly. I'm not happy that you're alone tonight. I'm happy that the truth is finally out in the open where everyone can see it and make their own informed decisions. She blinked in surprise at my response, clearly not expecting me to maintain my boundaries. "So, what happens now?" she asked, trying a different approach. "You never come home again? You cut me off forever? Is that what you want from all this drama?" I looked back at the sliver of warm light coming from my apartment, at the blurry shapes of people moving around inside, cleaning up, talking quietly, being real and authentic with each other. Then I looked directly back at her. "What I want," I said slowly and clearly, "is a mother who doesn't treat me like a servant or a spare part to be used when convenient. I want a family where my worth isn't measured solely by how well I make you look to other people. I honestly don't know if you're capable of being that kind of person at this stage of your life." She flinched as if I'd physically slapped her across the face. "So that's it then. You're cutting me off." "No," I said firmly. "That's actually just the starting line for any potential relationship. If you genuinely want a relationship with me moving forward, here are my non-negotiable conditions. You don't get to call me unnecessary or unwanted ever again under any circumstances. You don't touch money that belongs to me without explicit permission and full transparency. You don't use me as your emotional punching bag and then cry victim when I stop absorbing the hits. And most importantly, you apologize sincerely and completely for what you did. Not because you're embarrassed about getting caught publicly, but because you finally understand that stealing from me was fundamentally wrong, regardless of your reasons or justifications." Her eyes filled with tears again, and for just one moment, I thought she might actually say the words "I'm sorry" and genuinely mean them from her heart. But instead, she pulled herself upright, her spine stiffening with familiar pride and stubbornness. "I don't deserve to be spoken to like this after everything," she snapped, her old arrogance flaring back to life like a flame. "After everything I've done for this family over the years, after everything I've sacrificed for all of you ungrateful children." I cut her off with a small, tired smile that felt completely authentic. "Then you know exactly where the elevator is located," I said, nodding toward the end of the hallway. We both knew she wasn't coming inside my apartment tonight. Not tonight. Maybe not for a very long time. Maybe never. And I was finally at peace with that possibility. She stared at me intently for what felt like an eternity, clearly waiting for me to cave and give in like I always had before. I didn't move or speak or offer any comfort. After what felt like an eternity of heavy silence, she finally turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the hard floor. I watched until the elevator doors closed completely, until there was nothing left but my own reflection in the shiny metal surface. Then I went back inside to my real family. Nathan looked up anxiously when I entered. "She was here?" he asked quietly. "She was," I confirmed simply. "She left." "Did you two work anything out?" He trailed off, clearly unsure what he was even asking or hoping for. "I told her the complete truth," I replied simply. For once in my entire life, I told her exactly how I felt, and didn't apologize for it afterward. He nodded slowly, understanding that this simple act was actually a complete revolution in our family dynamics. Later, after Nathan had gone home and the apartment was completely quiet, I sat alone on the couch in the dim glow of my small tree lights and let the full weight of everything that had happened settle over me like a warm blanket. I'd blown up my family's favorite holiday tradition. I'd exposed long-buried secrets that were never supposed to see daylight. I'd left my mother sitting alone with the natural consequences of her own choices and actions. And despite all the chaos and drama I'd caused, I'd celebrated Christmas. Really, truly celebrated it with people who loved me. For the first time in my entire adult life, revenge isn't clean or simple or satisfying in the way movies make it seem. It doesn't magically fix the years you lost, or the trust that was broken, or the opportunities that were stolen. It just makes sure the person who hurt you finally stops walking around acting like they did nothing wrong, while everyone pretends not to notice the damage they've caused. Does it feel good? Absolutely. Does it fix everything that's broken? Not even close. But for the first time in my adult life, this story belongs completely to me. If your mother told you that nobody needs you to come this Christmas, would you swallow the hurt and show up anyway with a smile and homemade cookies? Or would you cancel her perfect little show and build something authentic and real for yourself instead? And more importantly, if you were in my exact situation with documented proof of years of financial betrayal and emotional manipulation, would you ever let her back into your life? Tell me in the comments below. Would you choose revenge, forgiveness, or something complicated and messy in between? Because sometimes the right answer isn't clear until you're living it yourself.